Usually when we think about setting a boundary, we kind of picture ourselves as like a traffic cop.
Oh, totally. Like blowing the whistle and putting your hand up.
Right. We put our hand up and direct traffic, telling people exactly where they can and cannot go. We say things like, you need to stop doing that, or you can't talk to me like that.
Yeah, we assume we're basically laying down the law.
Exactly. But when you look at the actual psychology of human behavior, well, that traffic cop badge is completely useless. Trying to control other people's actions is just a losing game.
It really is, mostly because you're stepping way out of your own jurisdiction. You're trying to govern someone else's nervous system and choices, which, I mean, that never works, especially when tensions are already running high.
Which is exactly why we are unpacking this today. So welcome to this deep dive.
Glad to be here. We've got a lot of ground to cover.
We really do. We have this fascinating stack of sources on the table today. We're looking at clinical studies on trauma and narcissistic abuse, the empowerment and boundaries assessment, recovery insights from Lynn Catalano, and somatic therapy frameworks from Julianne Taylor-Shore.
Plus some really highly tactical crisis negotiation methods drawn from neurolinguistic programming.
Yes, the NLP stuff is wild. Our mission today is to distill all of this into a tactical survival kit for you. We're looking at the exact mechanics of how to set healthy boundaries.
And specifically focusing on the absolute hardest part, maintaining calm directness when people push back, or escalate the emotional intensity, or try to guilt trip you.
Because that is where the entire concept of boundary setting just falls apart for most people, right?
Oh, 100%. I mean, we can all set a beautiful boundary in a calm room when we're completely alone. But defending it under fire, that requires actual practice skill.
And to build that skill, we really have to start with a massive core misunderstanding that just popped up across, like, all of our sources. Most of us think a boundary is a rule we make for someone else.
Which is entirely backwards. What's fascinating here is that a true boundary isn't a demand you place on another person at all.
Wait, not at all?
Not at all. According to the research from Job Cannon, a boundary is actually just a transparent statement of what you will do in response to their behavior. You can only set limits on your own actions.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I want to make sure we are actually building a boundary here for you, the listener, and not just making a polite request.
Right, there's a huge difference.
So if I can spin a metaphor based on these sources, setting a boundary isn't building a fence to lock someone else in. It's more like putting on a spacesuit to protect yourself.
I love that visual. A spacesuit.
Yeah, and a spacesuit works because it creates this self-contained atmosphere. You aren't out there trying to vacuum the toxicity out of outer space. I mean, that is literally impossible.
Right, you'd be trying to change the entire universe.
Exactly. You are just ensuring your own oxygen supply remains uncompromised, regardless of the crazy environment you walk into.
That captures the mechanics perfectly. You're insulating your own ecosystem, not terraforming theirs. But people constantly confuse the two.
They do, because if I tell a coworker, you can't speak to me that way in these meetings, that feels like I'm putting on the spacesuit. I'm telling them to stop.
It feels like a boundary, sure. But if we apply the Job Cannon framework, you can't speak to me that way, is still an attempt to control the environment. It's a demand.
Because I can't actually force them to stop talking.
Exactly. You have zero actual power to enforce it because their vocal cords belong to them. A real boundary shifts the locus of control entirely back to you.
So what does that actually sound like?
It sounds like, if voices are raised in this meeting, I will step out of the room until things calm down. Notice the shift in leverage there.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the first one relies entirely on their compliance. But the second one relies entirely on your own follow-through.
Right. A boundary you aren't prepared to enforce with your own physical actions is really just a request disguised as a rule.
That shift from demanding compliance to simply stating your own intended response, it just changes the entire power dynamic.
It does. But it also explains why setting boundaries is viscerally terrifying for a lot of people.
Terrifying is the right word. If we look at the clinical studies on trauma and the notes from recovery coach Lynn Catalano, it becomes clear why we struggle so much to just put on the spacesuit.
Yeah, for many of us, our nervous systems are just fundamentally miscalibrated.
And this is heavily documented, right? In the clinical research using the Empowerment and Boundaries Assessment, or EBA.
Yes, the EBA measures how chronic stress and emotional abuse basically erode cognitive boundaries. If you grew up or lived in deep dysfunction, chaos starts to feel normal.
Your brain just adapts to survive that specific environment.
Exactly.
And Catalano points out that you start broadcasting what she calls survival signals. You become hyper-responsible.
Oh, the hyper-responsibility is huge.
Right. You walk into a room and instantly feel like, okay, I have to manage everyone else's mood in here. Or you develop incredibly flexible boundaries so you can contort yourself to fit whatever chaotic situation is unfolding.
You essentially become an emotional chameleon just to stay safe.
Because the EDA data shows that in toxic environments, autonomy or just expressing a basic human need is routinely met with either aggressive retaliation or sudden emotional withdrawal.
And when that happens repeatedly over years, your nervous system actually wires connection to compliance. It literally misinterprets danger as safety.
So setting a boundary feels like a form of self-harm.
Yes, your amygdala fires off this massive warning that if you hold this limit, you will lose the relationship and be left entirely isolated.
So if you're listening to this right now and mapping it onto your own life, you might be looking for where this dynamic is playing out.
A really good diagnostic tool for that is your own resentment.
That slow burn of resentment.
Yeah. Ask yourself, where do you regularly feel depleted or angry? And not necessarily because of what was explicitly done to you, but because of what you agreed to do.
Oof. That's a hard question. But that resentment is usually your internal alarm bell telling you that a spacesuit is missing.
And this brings us to the hardest phase. Once you finally recognize that missing boundary, and you state your limit regarding your own behavior, you have to anticipate that the other person is going to test the integrity of that spacesuit.
Oh, they are absolutely going to knock on the helmet.
They will. They have to see if it's real.
So let's break down exactly what that pushback looks like biologically and psychologically so you aren't caught off guard. Our sources outline a few highly predictable patterns.
The first one is escalation. The other person rapidly raises the emotional intensity. We're talking yelling, crying, feigning outrage.
They do it to make you feel like your limit is causing massive, catastrophic damage.
Exactly. Because they are testing to see if the boundary is structural or just, decorative.
Right. But doesn't this run the risk of creating an extinction burst, like in behavioral psychology?
Oh, it's a textbook extinction burst.
Because when you stop rewarding a behavior, like when you finally say no to someone who is used to always hearing yes, they don't just quietly accept it.
No, their behavior actually gets much, much worse before it gets better. They escalate the pressure, assuming you'll eventually cave like you always have in the past.
So they're turning up the volume, hoping your system will just overload.
Precisely. And the instinct is usually to match their energy, to get defensive or yell back. But doing so just fuels the burst.
So that's escalation. But there is a second and maybe more insidious pattern of pushback, which is DARVO.
Yes. DARVO.
For those who haven't heard the term, that stands for deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender.
It is a devastatingly effective manipulation tactic. The person who just violated your limit or who is upset by your boundary completely denies that they did anything wrong.
Then they attack your character or your memory of the event.
Right. And then suddenly they claim that they are the one being traumatized by your rigid, uncaring boundary.
It's such a mind-bending experience because it completely hijacks your empathy.
It really does.
Like, you try to set a limit because they are constantly borrowing money without paying it back. And within 3 minutes, you're apologizing to them because they've somehow convinced you that your request for repayment is triggering their financial trauma.
It's a total reversal of reality.
Yeah.
And it works because it forces you onto the defensive. Instead of discussing the boundary, you're now defending your own character.
Which is exhausting. And then we have the third pattern from the sources, which is wearing down.
Yeah, this isn't a single dramatic explosion like DARVO or an extinction burst. It's an incremental daily erosion.
Which is especially common with people you live with or work really closely with.
That makes total sense from a neurological perspective because wearing down weaponizes decision fatigue.
Right. The human prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for impulse control and, holding firm on decisions, it has a limited daily battery.
Yes, you only have so much willpower in a day.
So if someone applies gentle, continuous pressure, asking the same boundary crossing question in 10 slightly different ways over a week, they're just waiting for your prefrontal cortex to exhaust itself.
Until you finally just throw your hands up and say, fine, just this once.
And just this once teaches them that the boundary isn't real. It just requires a bit more friction to dismantle.
Exactly. But whether they are using escalation or Darvo or wearing you down, there is one underlying mechanism they're all trying to trigger.
Guilt induction. The sources highlight this as the ultimate obstacle, but there's a crucial distinction made here that I think completely reframes the whole experience.
Yes, the difference between signal guilt and conditioned guilt. We're dealing with two entirely different biological and psychological phenomena here.
So if we connect this to the bigger picture of moral psychology, signal guilt is that deeply uncomfortable feeling you get when you have genuinely caused harm.
Like if you borrow your friend's car and back it into a mailbox, you feel signal guilt.
Yes, it's warranted, and it's a highly evolved pro-social emotion. It's telling you to repair the damage and make amends. Your internal moral compass is functioning correctly.
But conditioned guilt is a completely different mechanism pretending to be the same thing. Conditioned guilt is what you feel when you simply trigger old, outdated programming.
It's that wave of nausea you feel when you disappoint someone.
Right.
Or decline an unreasonable request.
Or just express a preference that differs from what your family wants you to do. You feel immense guilt, like you've committed a crime.
But you haven't actually done anything wrong.
Right. Because the feeling of guilt doesn't always mean your boundary is wrong. It often just means you're breaking an old rule you were taught in childhood about keeping other people comfortable at your own expense.
So your body is firing the exact same physiological alarm bells for, I backed over the mailbox and I told my mother I can't host Thanksgiving this year.
Yes, that is a phenomenal distinction.
When someone uses guilt induction to push back against your boundary, they're actively trying to trigger that conditioned guilt. They might reframe your limit as selfish or arrogant.
So knowing all of this, knowing they will escalate, they will reverse the victim order, they will try to wait out your prefrontal cortex and deliberately trigger your conditioned guilt.
How do you actually stop yourself from caving in the heat of the moment?
It starts entirely internally. Before you can handle their emotional output, you must handle your own nervous system.
And this is where somatic therapy and internal family systems, or IFS, come into play. For those unfamiliar, IFS is a therapeutic framework that looks at our mind not as a single block, but as a collection of different parts or subpersonalities.
Parts that step in to protect us, yeah.
According to the work of counselor Helen Beenan and Julianne Taylor-Shore's 6 steps for setting boundaries, you have to physically anchor yourself.
Shore specifically points to step 4, which is noticing your internal system, and step 5, creating a self-soothing plan.
If we look at the biology of an escalating conflict, when someone starts yelling or guilt-tripping you, they're trying to trigger your amygdala, the fear center of your brain.
And when your amygdala perceives a threat, it completely hijacks the system. Your prefrontal cortex, that logical, reasoning part of your brain that remembers the boundary, basically goes offline.
You literally cannot think your way through the interaction anymore. Your body shifts into pure survival mode.
Which usually means fawning, appeasing, or just retreating. You have to practice the pause to physically intervene in your own nervous system.
So your logic center can turn back on.
Precisely. And the sources offer incredibly practical biological tools for this. When you feel that spike of fear or the wave of conditioned guilt, you can physically ground yourself.
Just placing a hand firmly on your heart or your belly sends a physiological signal of safety to your brain.
It seems almost too simple to work, but the mechanics behind it are incredibly solid. Tactile feedback, like the pressure of a hand on your chest, stimulates the vagus nerve.
So it physically interrupts the release of cortisol.
Exactly. It signals to your parasympathetic nervous system that you are contained and safe, overriding the threat signals coming from the other person screaming.
It creates a micro moment of biological regulation, and there's a visualization technique from the source, her aligned self, that pairs perfectly with this physical grounding.
The white light visualization, right?
Yeah. While holding your hand on your chest, you visualize a circle of divine white light surrounding your physical body. You feel the light enveloping you, creating an impenetrable shield like the spacesuit we talked about.
Keeping their negative emotional output out, while infusing your own internal environment with a sense of safety.
Mental imagery is highly effective at shifting internal states, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Because the brain processes vivid visualizations using many of the same neural pathways as real physical experiences.
They also recommend combining this with a grounding affirmation. One that really jumped out from the notes is, I gently gather up all of my scattered energy, bringing it back to me.
That's a powerful one. When someone is escalating, your energy scatters. You are intensely focused outward, tracking their anger, their judgment, their potential reaction.
So you have to consciously gather that focus back to your own physical body.
Because once your internal nervous system is regulated, your prefrontal cortex comes back online. You regain access to your adult faculties.
You can actually choose how to respond rather than just reacting from a place of childlike fear.
Okay, so let's walk this through. You've taken your pause. Your hand is on your heart. Your vagus nerve is doing its job.
You've gathered your energy and visualized your spacesuit. Now, what actual words come out of your mouth when the other person is still standing there, escalating their emotional intensity?
If starving them of the reaction they want is the goal, we have to look at two specific communication tactics drawn from neuro-linguistic programming.
NLP.
Yes, NLP looks closely at how communication patterns directly influence nervous system responses. Let's start with the gray rock method.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
Gray rock is brilliantly counterintuitive. The goal is to make yourself as uninteresting and unresponsive as a literal gray rock.
Because toxic people, or those with highly manipulative tendencies, often operate on a dopamine reward system.
Right. They get a neurochemical hit from controlling your emotions or creating drama, your distress, your anger, or your frantic over-explaining. That's their fuel.
So if they poke you with a guilt trip and you start crying or defending yourself, their brain registers a successful hit. They got the reaction, the dopamine flows, and the behavior is reinforced.
Exactly.
Right.
So you deliberately cut off the reward circuit. You give short, flat, neutral responses.
You don't argue, you don't defend your boundary, and you do not over-explain yourself.
Nope. If they say something highly inflammatory designed to bait you, you simply say, I receive that, or I'll consider it, or even just a flat,
Just completely flat. The first few times you do this, it feels incredibly uncomfortable because you are fighting your own urge to correct the record.
Always agonizing at first. But by doing nothing, you are starving the fire of oxygen.
And eventually, because they are no longer getting that dopamine hit, their nervous system realizes this tactic isn't working.
Right. They will lose interest and look elsewhere for their emotional supply.
That is incredibly effective for when you just want to disengage completely. But what if you are in a situation where you can't just walk away?
Like a colleague you have to finish a project with.
Yeah, or a family member at a dinner table, and you need to actively de-escalate their amygdala so their logic center turns back on. That brings us to LVA.
LVA is a crisis negotiation tactic. It stands for listen, acknowledge, validate, and ask forward.
It's designed to de-escalate someone's anger without compromising your own reality or agreeing with their unreasonable demands.
This is a delicate balance, so let's break down the mechanics.
Okay, the L and the A, listen and acknowledge, are essentially about holding space. You listen without interrupting, letting them burn off some of that initial adrenaline.
Then you acknowledge their emotion without making it about you. You just reflect the temperature in the room, like it sounds like you were incredibly frustrated.
But how do we handle the V? How do you validate their experience if they are accusing you of something completely untrue?
This is where most people stumble. What's fascinating here is that you must validate the emotion, not the complaint or the delusion. You are validating that if you saw the world through their specific lens, you would be upset too.
The NLP source gives a very extreme example to illustrate this perfectly.
It does. Imagine you are dealing with a friend who is deeply paranoid and genuinely believes the government is surveilling them through your phone calls.
Okay, a very extreme delusion, but it highlights the mechanism perfectly.
If you say, yes, the government is listening, you're agreeing with the delusion. You are validating false facts. But if you say, you're crazy, no one is listening, you invalidate their reality and they will escalate their panic.
So what do you do instead?
You validate the emotion driving the delusion. You say, if I believe the government was monitoring my calls, I would be absolutely terrified and angry too. It makes total sense that you feel so much fear right now.
You are validating the physiological reality of their feeling without validating the facts they are using to justify it.
Exactly. You are telling them your emotional response makes sense given your internal narrative.
And when a human being feels truly heard and understood on an emotional level, their defense mechanisms lower. Their emotional intensity naturally drops. They de-escalate.
And once you see that physiological shift, once their breathing slows down and the tension breaks, you move to the final step. Ask forward.
You shift the cognitive load back to problem solving. You ask, what would make this feel resolved for you today? Or how do we move forward from here?
It is an incredibly powerful way to navigate high conflict situations.
It really is. But Bringing out frameworks like Greyrock or LVA does raise a thorny question. Is using these tactics manipulative?
It's a very common concern.
Right, because if I'm deliberately modifying my communication style to manage their dopamine levels or de-escalate their amygdala, aren't I just playing psychological games too?
The Job Canon source draws a very clear ethical line here. Setting limits on your own behavior and consciously managing your emotional output is self-determination.
Okay.
Manipulation, by definition, involves exploiting someone's vulnerabilities or deceiving them to bypass their rational agency. A boundary or a de-escalation technique like LVA operates transparently.
So manipulation is actively trying to trick someone into doing what you want against their own interests. Setting a boundary is just stating what you are going to do to maintain your own safety, full stop.
Precisely. And often, the person who accuses you of being manipulative for using the Greyrock method or setting a boundary is the person who has been quietly benefiting from your lack of boundaries for years.
Wow. Yeah, your newfound self-protection feels like an attack on their convenience.
It's a hard truth to swallow.
It is. So what does this all look like when put together? If you are trying to break free from these cycles, Lynn Catalana describes the ultimate goal as moving from survival mode to a position of grounded strength.
It requires shifting from internal people-pleasing to setting external physical boundaries.
It means shifting from automatically reacting to whatever emotional storm someone brings into your orbit to pausing, physically regulating your vagus nerve, and responding from a place of calm self-respect.
And the incredible side effect of maintaining that spacesuit, as the sources note, is that your relational ecosystem will change.
You will eventually become magnetic to healthy people and naturally repellent to toxic ones. Healthy people love clear boundaries because it takes the guesswork out of the relationship.
And highly manipulative people hate them because they remove their leverage. Which brings us to the ultimate fear people have when they begin this process.
This raises an important question. What if setting a boundary ends your relationship entirely?
Right. What if you put on the spacesuit, you calmly state what you're willing to do, you survive the extinction burst,
Yep.
you don't fall for the Darby trap, and the other person just packs up and walks away?
It is a genuine risk, and it happens. But I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought from the clinical material to mull over long after this deep dive ends.
If a relationship can only continue to exist because you have no limits, it isn't actually a healthy, freely chosen relationship.
No, it is just a dynamic where your availability is purely functional. You are just a utility to them, a vending machine for compliance.
Exactly. So look at your own life and the connections you are terrified of losing. Ask yourself, are my relationships freely chosen partnerships, or are they just surviving off my lack of boundaries?
Because if a relationship shatters simply because you finally decided to put on a spacesuit to ensure you had enough oxygen to survive, maybe there wasn't much air in that relationship to begin with. Keep your helmet on, protect your energy, and we'll see you next time.